Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Internationally podcast. Before we start, let me talk a little bit about the podcast. So, the Internationally podcast is going to be a space where different international students, prospective ones, as well as current international students, could get a glimpse of the life of international students in the US or abroad. And this week, I am joined by my very, very dear friend, Anushka. Welcome to the show, Anushka.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So before we dive into our conversation, let me talk a little bit about your background. So Anushka is from Kolkata, India. She went to Smith College and graduated in May 2019. She double majored in economics and psychology. After graduation, she worked at a think tank in Washington, D.C., doing economics and policy research. She recently moved back to her home country of India. Do you want to add more?
I think that covers everything.
All right. So, as a starting question, as the title is dealing with expectations, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word expectations?
Yeah, when you say expectations, I think two things. First thing is expectations come from different places. It can come from your parents, it can come from your siblings, your friends, your teachers. It can come from just society in general. This is how you're supposed to be because you are this person. The other side of expectations, which I think I will be focusing a lot more on, is expectations that you put on yourself, expectations that you have from yourself.
All right. Yeah. So I think it's really helpful that you divided the expectations that international students face when they go abroad. So the first one is the expectations from family, and then the second one is the expectations that you put on yourself to succeed in college. So if I may ask, what were some of the expectations that your family had for you when you went to college?
That's an interesting question.
Uh-huh.
When I went to college, there was nothing explicitly put. There was your usual: don't drink too much, don't party too much, get good grades, but
Yeah.
nothing very explicitly or very strongly put on me. So when I went into college, I had these general, usual, I guess, expectations from yourself that you you should do well. Well is subjective, I guess.
Yeah. 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 I think when I think about my own personal experience, as you said, it wasn't explicitly put like these are the things that you need to do when you go to college. But the underlying assumption was that you have to get good grades, you have to graduate, you cannot drop out of college. And what was the other? You probably should choose a field that you could be successful in, right? So
Mm.
even though these things weren't explicitly said, you kind of understand it, just because of how you grew up and like and especially if you have like siblings who are older than you who've went through that same process, you could just understand or like, pick on things that, okay, these are the things that I'm supposed to do. So my second question would be, what were the expectations that you put on yourself as an international student?
Absolutely, just like what you said, when you go to college, um, choosing a major that you think you'll be successful in, choosing a major that is smart. And I think as international students, we also have to be a little bit careful about the majors we need to choose, because hey, is that going to give me the 2 year STEM OPT extension? These are things that
Yes.
you have to think about and that
Mm-hmm.
you should consider, I guess, before you go to college.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me was a little naive, and part of me was not so naive. I ended up choosing a major that gave me STEM extension, but not necessarily because it gave me the extension, but because I just happened to like it. And I think, going back to the point of siblings, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think this was psychology that gave me STEM extension. And I think
Uh-huh.
I chose it because my sister was interested in psychology, So just it's
Wow.
funny how
Yeah.
I my own interests lay in what my siblings were doing before me and the processes that they went through. Another story that comes to my mind when you say that is expectations that your parents have from you. And I went into college undeclared. I went into college thinking I'd major in history and psychology, which ended up not happening except for psychology, but that's a story for another day. But my
Mm-hmm.
mother in India is telling my relatives, so Anushka is studying economics at Smith, and I
Oh
haven't even
no.
taken a single economics class. And I'm just like,
Oh wow.
what are you saying? Don't spread lies. And from
Yeah.
sophomore year, I am declaring an economics major,
So, do
and
you
I've
think that was because of the pressure that your family put on you that you chose that field?
I will never know. I will never know if I chose economics because I was genuinely interested, or if it was because my mom is telling everybody in India that Anushka is an economics major. And I'm like, I might as well be one now.
Right? Wow, that is so interesting. And I think that story goes to show um, how influential our parents can be. Um, because basically they're the ones who raised us, and so we kind of have this feeling of not wanting to disappoint them by choosing something that they might not approve of.
Mm-hmm.
So when I come to my own experience, my first year I was pre-med. So
Mm-hmm.
both my parents are doctors, and so I was like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be. This is my destiny. I'm gonna be a doctor. So I went to college. So my first year I was taking all these science classes, but then by the end of the year I was just like, what am I doing? I mean, I wasn't I wasn't really struggling with the classes. I just wasn't passionate about them. And so starting my sophomore year, I decided to take classes outside of, STEM, and I started taking social science classes, all these classes that I thought I would never take, but then I ended up actually enjoying. And so, my other question for you is, how do you deal with the expectations?
That's a tough one. How do you deal with the expectations? I think um, it is helpful to really recognize what is what you can do and what you cannot do. I think it is, while it is a good thing to know what your strengths are, it is also a good thing to know
Yeah.
what your limitations are. Like you just said,
Mhm.
it's not that you did badly in STEM, you just did not enjoy it. And I'm so proud of you
Yeah.
that you actually went through that entire process of
Aw.
thinking and actually
Yeah.
fighting with yourself, right? And telling yourself that this is not for you. And that is a very difficult process. And I know so many people
Yeah.
who get stuck in majors because that is the right thing to do, in air
Hmm.
quotes,
Yeah. Yeah.
um
For sure.
it is so difficult to have that conversation with yourself and really recognizing what is good for you, what you want to do. So I think with these expectations, there is a lot of introspection that is required. You should really see what your strengths and limitations are, what your interests are, what
Yeah.
you want to do, and what are some things that you yourself want to do versus what others want you to do.
Right. And as you said, like obviously it wasn't an easy decision to make, like going against the expectations that my family had of me. But I also have to mention that I was surprised when I told them that this is not the path I want to take. I actually want to take a different path because my sister is also in STEM. And so I was like, she can fulfill those expectations, but me, I'm gonna do my own thing, and then I'm gonna do something that I honestly didn't know even like anybody in like going in that field for my family. So it was a new territory. But what I want to stress was the fact that when I told my parents, they were actually supportive. And so I think that was a a very unexpected thing because sometimes what you think your parents want of you and then what they actually do is actually different. So when you're honest with them and then when you actually like tell them, okay, this is what I want, I realize that at the end of the day they just want you to be happy and successful. So have you had that instance where you thought your parents wanted this thing and then you did something else, but then they surprised you?
Funny, funny that you asked that, because
Yeah.
I have a very big story from that
Yeah,
exact
please
thing.
share.
I said, I went into college naive. Really, I went into college thinking I can do everything. I can fill my schedule up with social activities, academic activities, everything. And I essentially exhausted myself. I didn't give myself the time to breathe and to really get adjusted to this new American education system. And come to the end of the semester, and I get my grades, and I have done terribly. I haven't done very well. And really, really breaking that international student stereotype over there, not doing
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yep.
And I go back to India, and my parents ask me, what how was your semester, how did you do?
Yeah.
And for them, of course, the tell is, what grade did you get? That's how we'll know how your semester went. And
Mm-hmm.
I have strategically avoided this conversation with them throughout the break,
Uh-huh.
until that last moment when my dad sits me down and he asks me to show him my grades. He's like, why aren't you sharing? Just tell me. And I'm so scared, but I show it to him, and he looks at it, and he's like, well, there's room for improvement. And it made me so
Wow.
happy, because this entire time that I've been beating myself up, that they're
Yeah.
going to be so mad at me, or they're going to be disappointed. And just this one line of encouragement really helped me in the next semesters. So absolutely right, having that tough conversation really, really helps, sometimes.
Yeah.
hopefully
I know.
hopefully all the time,
Yeah.
but maybe not.
Yeah, that's true. So was that your first semester of college?
Yes, that was after my first semester of college.
Yeah. And I think that is the test, I feel like, into like how well you have adjusted to college, how well you have taken your classes, because that first semester you're bombarded with a lot of information, and you have to adjust to the culture shock, you have to do a lot of things, and then at the same time you have to get those grades that you think your parents will approve of. And so I'm really impressed that we both have the same experiences. But this also doesn't mean that every single parent out there is going to be as understanding. But I just wanted to highlight that sometimes the things that we take for granted, the things that we think that our parents want of us, sometimes their responses could take us by surprise.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my other question for you is, um, going back to like finding that courage to do something new, um how did you find that courage, honestly, to like explore things, to like, how did you feel when like the expectations that you think you had of yourself, or like the expectations that your family had on you, when those things didn't match, how did you find the courage to continue?
I found somebody else who was excited about it. the
Yeah.
the funny thing is that, when you don't get the right reaction from one person, you might get it from another.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, in general, my parents were happy with the decision that I was an econ major. My sister was, like, excited about psychology. They were excited about psychology too, but my
Mm-hmm.
sister is a psychologist, so she was excited about psychology. I have somebody to talk to about that. The different thing that I would say I did was actually learn Mandarin. And so many times I've been asked by different people, why Mandarin? And what is it going to do to you? What value is it going to add to you, to your life?
Yeah.
And just the conversations I've had with other people who are excited about the fact that I'm learning something new, that I am going into a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
um I think that really helps. That keeps you going, knowing that, hey, if one person doesn't value this thing that you're doing as much as you would like them to, somebody else is
Yeah.
there, who is there to encourage you, who will be your cheerleader, so to say.
Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely agree with what you said about like finding someone, um who shares the same interest as you, who's in the same field as you, so then you can build up on that and share your experiences. Um, so now I'm going to bring the question back to, not back to, but I'm going to bring another question about identity and
Mm-hmm.
expectations. So I feel like a lot of times international students are put into this box where, I mean, even though we come from many different countries, like we kind of share this. Um, I don't know, stereotype might not be the best word, but people expect us to perform well. Let me just
Absolutely.
put it that.
Yeah.
So, have there been any instances in your career as an international student at
Mm-hmm.
college where your identity has had crossed paths with the expectations that people had of you?
Absolutely. It's funny that you say that. And I like that you said that there is this international student identity, then there is your country specific identity. And that is so very real. And I have had instances where that has been pointed out to me, I I like, it isn't necessarily a bad story, and at that moment
Yeah,
it made me, it actually helped me. But like I just said, I took Mandarin, and this was something I started as a first year student in college and did
yeah,
for 3 years, and I was breaking all the stereotypes that you just mentioned. We think that the international student as well and all of that, because I was doing terribly at Mandarin. I was not a good
yeah.
student. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, moving on to my sophomore year of Mandarin, of taking Mandarin, and I'm still not doing the best. I'm getting better, but not as good as maybe other domestic students. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and my professor is, who I'm really close to, who looked at my grades and was really encouraged me to study abroad and all of that. Saw a potential in me, and to kind of, I guess, light the fire in me, she looks at me and she tells me, "Hey, Anushka, you're Indian. Indians are so smart. You can do
Oh my
this."
God.
I mean,
Oh my God.
I can see how some people can take offense in that statement, but
Yeah.
very honestly, it helped me. I
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't come from a bad place. I know what she meant. She
Right.
was trying to be encouraging, but
Mm-hmm.
and it did the work, man. I did well. I really,
Yeah.
the atmosphere of the class and her relationship with me was just so supportive and so encouraging that
Mm-hmm.
I ended up doing well. And so when I finally got that
Wow.
90 in class, we she like announced it to the entire class that this girl is doing
Oh
so
my God.
well, and like everybody
Wow.
clapped for me. I think it was a funny experience, but
Mm.
just that moment was the first time that I think my identity as an Indian, something that I think, not to make this conversation about something else, but something that also becomes so much more obvious when you are in an international space, you as an Indian,
Mm-hmm.
but me as an
Yeah.
Indian in a classroom was just made very obvious, and these expectations of doing well were
Mhm.
sort of put on me, but in an
Right.
encouraging way.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you shared that story because when I first heard you say that, I was like, "Whoa! Like, why would she say that?" But I'm really glad that you took it in a positive way and then used it for your own advantage, where you were able to get a good grade because of that statement that your professor had made. Um, for me, honestly, I don't really remember an instance where my identity had, like being Ethiopian, had to do with my performance in school or how, I don't really have that kind of instance, but well, okay, maybe there's this one time that, so obviously we weren't a lot of, so the school that we went to is predominantly white, and so there aren't a lot of international students, let alone a lot of Ethiopians. So in terms of like grades and performance, a lot of the students that I know, they were in STEM.
Mhm.
So most of the Ethiopians, I know were in STEM. So I think I was the only one who was doing something outside of that. So I studied sociology, economics, and so I kind of felt that pressure to still choose STEM because every Ethiopian around me was doing STEM.
Right.
And I kind of understand why they were doing it, because obviously it's because of family expectations, and you come from a developing country, you want to choose a profession that guarantees you a job, right? So if you're a doctor, obviously you're going to be hired. Um, and so I did feel instances where I was like, maybe I should stick to STEM. But then I was glad that I didn't make that decision, just because of uh, that expectations that I felt like, people had of Ethiopians were always in STEM. But my other question for you, Anushka, is how do you deal with expectations from other international students or other students basically in college, but the people that we call overachievers? So when you see someone, right? So when you see someone in college doing everything, they're the president of 5 clubs, they are getting straight A's in every single class, taking 24 credits, and doing an internship at this amazing firm. Or so how do you deal with those those kinds of pressure, I must say, from people who you think are, doing everything.
I think it's so funny because that you say that, because I think that is really not possible. These overachievers are lying. They are not telling you the full
You think
truth.
so?
Absolutely. Who can do this?
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
I think, as you might remember, um there's such an environment that usually gets created in college, where you feel the need to tell people, I am so busy doing all of these cool things, but there is
Yep.
a little bit of a shame in revealing that I actually let go of this thing that I was not able to do, or that I'm struggling here, I'm not doing as well as I hoped to in this other thing.
Yeah.
You only focus on the positive sides. You only talk about the big picture. Yes, I'm the president of this org, but not really saying that,
Yeah.
hey, actually we just meet once a semester. you know so it just I
Yeah.
think there is a lot of and I'm not trying to say here that there is I think there is a system that is created where you feel like you need to only talk about the good things, the big things, and how busy you are. This is taking it a little differently, but I remember a lot of times in college I would hear so many people say, I have a meeting. And when you hear the word meeting, you think, oh, you're meeting a
Yeah.
professor or something. It's very legit, but you are literally just
Yeah.
meeting a friend for dinner. That is not a meeting. You know what I mean? So
Wow.
there is just so much
Yeah.
pressure, I think, um in
Yeah.
in in students to kind of, at least this was what I saw at Smith's, to really sound busy and to sound like you're doing so many cool things that you cannot have free time. Like, you are it is just, what are you doing with your life if you have 30 minutes free in a day?
Exactly. And it kind of makes you feel guilty for not doing anything, which is also that's a very interesting thing that you brought up, because do you remember at Smith, like there was the stress Olympics where like during
Oh,
finals.
yes.
Okay, do you want to explain for our audience what the stress Olympics
Well,
is?
stress Olympics is basically when you're close to finals and you have all your assignments and exams due, and you're sitting with a friend at a dinner table and you're talking to them, and you list all these different things that you have to do, and then the other person takes out their list and then mentions all the things that they have to do, which is more than yours, so their stress
Mhm.
trumps yours. And so
Yep.
they are, I don't know, are they the cooler person here because they have more stress? Is that what it
I mean, it's more of a race of how much work you have to do. And so the person with the most work basically
is?
wins.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's
exactly.
like, right?
What is the point
Because
of this?
I have no idea. And I used to talk about this a lot with my friends and with the class deans as well, where it would be around finals and I would be sitting, in the cafeteria trying to eat my dinner in peace, and then someone would come and they're like, so how are your finals week going? What kind of assignments do you have? And then I'll tell them, oh, I have this paper, I have this final exam, blah, blah, blah. But it's not as exaggerated. And then they go to tell me they have 5 different homeworks, different projects. I mean, 4 different, like, whatever, like, final exams. And then they just leave. And so I was like, what is the point of this conversation? Just to tell me that you have more work than me? Like, how? Uh, so I, especially doing finals, I used to avoid going to the cafeteria. I used to just stay in my room and then do my work, because it's not even like, once you go into that space of, once you're like competing in the Olympics, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
it will be difficult for you to get out. And so you kind of subscribe to this mentality that your stress is more important than someone else's stress. So I'm so glad that we talked about this, because this also goes with the expectations that people have with each other as well.
Absolutely. And I think
Uh,
what you
yeah.
said about comparing stresses and then determining whose is more important is so real, right? Because then it makes you think that why am I feeling stressed? Why am I not doing enough? And maybe next semester I should take more classes or whatever, be more busy. But that's just, like I said earlier, recognizing what you can and cannot do, and not
Mhm.
being a part of this stress race is the best thing that you can do for yourself. it,
Exactly.
this
Yeah,
is so funny,
that is
right?
very true.
Sorry, but
Mm.
all of us as
No, no, no.
international
Continue.
students, I think there are so many times when I have seen that international students feel the need to take 24 credits. The limit is 24, so I'm going to stick to 24. And that is such a toxic thing to do to yourself, to keep yourself so busy, and really not taking care of yourself otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, that is very true. And I think that that goes with the topic that we're talking about, with expectations. Like, when you see other people doing all these things, like, you think that you have to do it as well. Uh, But as we're ending this conversation, do you have any advice for prospective as well as current international students who are figuring things out, who are dealing with problems, and when they're facing expectations? Like, what kind of advice can you give them to pass through that time?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned briefly earlier, I definitely had a tough time settling into college. I definitely was really hard on myself. And there were so many things about college that, there's so many systems in college that can make your process easier, like dropping a class, pass failing a class. These are features that exist because they are very, the struggle during college is very real, and they exist so that you can use it. So I hope somebody listens to this and actually, realizes that they're really hard on themselves, and they can step back, they can drop a class, they can pass fail that class, they can reduce the amount of expect they can remove, they can reduce the amount of things that they're a part of, they can take some time off for themselves. And that would be the best thing that you can do for yourself. I was really harsh on myself at different points in college for different things, and it essentially exhausted me. um uh,
Yeah.
like a funny story that Ruth, you might remember, once I told you, was that senior year I'm walking on campus, and I'm just, this is a normal day, I haven't done anything, and I'm walking on campus and
Mm-hmm.
somebody looks at me, and I recognize them, so I smile at them, and they look at me, and they just tell me, hey, everything's gonna be all right, like this too shall pass. And I'm just like, is it so obvious from my face that I
Mm-hmm.
am very exhausted? And
Yeah.
this is not a conversation you want to have with somebody. So please, like people have told me, like professors have told me, be kind to yourself, be more
Mm-hmm.
forgiving of yourself, and just take a break when you need to,
Yeah.
recognize when you can pass fail that class, recognize when you can drop that class and do it.
Yeah, that's such a good advice, because even like, because when we talk about these experiences, obviously these are our own personal experiences, but I'm pretty sure someone else has also been through our shoes. And for those people who are thinking about applying to colleges abroad, or who are currently in college but are international students, I would just say, like, how you deal with expectations is just how you deal with yourself. It shows how much respect you have for yourself, because if you're willing to go through all that stress and so much pressure that you put on yourself, but then at the end of the day you're not happy with that, then I think that's something that you should question. And then it goes also back to the thing that we said, like, both of us, when we told our parents that well, you with not getting the perfect grade, or like with me with changing like my major, and the response we received from our parents was actually encouraging, which was contrary to what we thought they would say. It also goes to show that the pressure that we put on ourselves, or like the pressure that we think our family puts on us, could actually be misleading, if we don't have those honest and candid conversations with our parents. But I understand at the same time that not every parent could be as understanding as ours, which is why a lot of international students tend to
Absolutely.
put to be in a field that they're not even interested in. But then at the end of the day, I think looking back, like, we've both graduated from college, but the grade that we got in a specific class is not what we think about right now. We think about the experiences that we
Absolutely.
had. I remember we used to have, like, senior year, because we wouldn't see each other a lot, we would have like our weekly
Mm-hmm.
lunches, which really helped, maintain those close relationships with people. And we're still friends until now, because even after we graduated, because we prioritized the friendship rather than just, like, focus on the academics part of it. So I would just say, take your time and um, explore classes that you'd never take,
Absolutely.
So yeah, and the expectations will go away, because you will have expectations all your life. College is just one part of your life. And I think, um, for a lot of people who are trying to go to college as an international student, I think our stories could help them see that, it's not all that it's supposed to be.
Absolutely. And it's completely okay if you make a mistake, if you mess up. There is no this ideal international student doesn't exist. That's not true. We make mistakes.
Yes, yes, yes. That is so true. That is very true. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we end the second episode of the Internationally podcast. Anushka, thank you so much for agreeing to be my guest. I hope a lot of people would appreciate hearing our stories. And if they have any questions and concerns, oh yeah, I have an Instagram page. I didn't advertise it in my last episode. So, as Internationally by Ruth is on Instagram. And then if you have any questions and concerns about the life of an international student, you could email internationally by Ruth, LIE, at gmail.com.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for
Anushka.
having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Of course.